Thank you for joining me for another quick hits conversation. Today, I would love to talk about when or why you might want or need to manage up. Elizabeth, can you kick us off?
Yes, I think there are a number of different scenarios where you would need to manage up. I've had bosses that needed their entire day to be managed for them so that they didn't lose their minds, which is one extreme situation. But then I've also had bosses that just needed a gentle reminder that we're working together. We're on the same team. We have the same goals. And communication is always key, I think, in those situations. Clear goals and communication.
Mm-hmm.
And remembering that you're on the same team, you're working together.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you are on the same team and working together, that's absolutely on target. I wonder, as somebody who's never really particularly had a structured job with a boss and a hierarchy, if maybe I'm watching this from the outside in, but as an observer and as a coach, I feel that quite often managers have an agenda and the people they manage have an agenda and the organization has an agenda, and they needn't all be following exactly the same set of rails. They might not all be going to the same station. And sometimes managing up is when you recognize that and you don't have the facility to change track or go around the manager and talk to somebody else. So you have to try and manage that manager into the same direction as everybody else is going.
Steve, it sounds like you've had a wonderfully bohemian life, having never had a manager. I must learn some more about that. But I think Elizabeth makes a good point here around managing upwards, doesn't she? Because is managing upwards giving your boss what they want? In which case, just by working for your manager, you're potentially managing upwards. So I see it slightly differently, or see another viewpoint on that, which is managing upwards. And I used this term last time, which would cause Robyn to react to, but perhaps a little bit of manipulating of your boss to get what you want. So, or a little bit of working with your boss to get out of your career, your life, your whatever it is in that, to get what it is that you want. So it might be you're looking for, I don't know, pay rise, career, or maybe just better conditions in your workspace, just something that where you can work with your boss to allow that to happen, rather than them telling you what to do.
It sounds like we have three different kind of ideas going on here. Elizabeth, you're talking about working with your boss, making sure that they have, that they're all on the same team. Tim, you're talking about actually manipulation and like you're working against your boss, getting them to do something that you want them to do that maybe they don't want to do. And then Steve, you're talking about getting people on the same track. So we're talking about different things as far as managing up. And the reason that this conversation came up is that in the LinkedIn post, there was the idea that you only need to manage a bad boss. And I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think that managing up is about making sure the lines of communication are open. And all three of your points are really good, getting what you need. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you only manage a bad boss, or do you have to manage a good boss too?
Go on, Tim.
This has already expanded my thoughts on managing upwards, which is great. That's what it's for, isn't it? But I think there's a sort of a spectrum-y type thing where, you've got a bad boss over here and a good boss over here, and and the managing upwards piece changes depending on that spectrum, where it is on that spectrum, but also that individual. And it also depends on how they are with you and how you are with them. But I still link, for me, and manipulation sounds like is perhaps an extreme word, but managing upwards for me is acting with your boss in a way to get your own interests heard or your own agenda on the higher level of the table. But
that brings up a different question for me then. Is managing up underhanded? Does your boss not realize, or do you have to keep your boss on the down low?
It depends on how you do it. Manipulation sounds like such an ugly word, but we do it all the time. I mean, if there's something that we want, just by asking for it, is that manipulating the situation in a sense?
Or is that just asking for what you want?
Exactly. It sounds bad, but the truth is, maybe you ask a question of a boss and say, if we're working towards this goal and we're trying to accomplish the next step, what do you think we should do next? And you know what you need to do next, and you're letting it be his idea. because then he's going to be on board with it. Well,
yeah,
a little bit manipulative.
That's what John Laval calls persuasion engineering.
Right.
Which is manipulation, but it's a posher name. But here's the thing. You can have a great boss who's got great vision and lovely strategy and is going in the corporate direction, taking the organization exactly where they need to go, etc., etc. They may be wonderful at managing the team, but they may have blinkers on when it comes to managing individuals within the team. They may just not see it because they're so driven by their own agenda and the organization's agenda that they fail to recognize that there are issues, perhaps at a team level, perhaps as an individual, or conflicts between individuals that needs to be addressed, and he as the manager or she as the manager has to do that addressing. If they don't see it, they can't manage it. So then you have to manage up to draw the attention into that team. They can be looking at numbers and charts and organizational objectives and all of that, key performance indicators, but fail to recognize that there are humans in there not having a great time.
Yeah, that resonates with me a lot, Steve, is the idea that if you're, if you're unhappy or the team is unhappy or there is unhappiness, then managing upwards to resolve that, that is a use of managing upwards as a technique. Is it still a manipulation? Potentially, yeah.
I think it depends upon how you identify or define manipulation, which we're not going to get into here because that's a whole separate conversation. Maybe you do that another time. But I like that idea of managing upwards being when you want to call your boss's attention to something, because that could be positive, it could be negative. I think that's a really good definition of when might you want to manage up. Well, if you need to call your boss's attention to something, that's a really good way to look at it.
That's a good measurement. That's a good yardstick.
Particularly if it's something that's derailing the outcomes, vision, mission, values of the business or yourself. So if it's derailing your own values, mission, vision, then that might be the time to bring it up. So I guess, does that mean then that there are chosen times to manage upwards? Do we select, do we pick our battles?
Well,
if you manage upwards all the time, if you're constantly having those conversations with your manager, then that manager is not doing the job, or you're not doing the job. So, yeah,
there's a breakdown, right?
Yeah, there's a breakdown in there somewhere. So yes, I think in general terms, you pick your battle. You have the conversation when it's appropriate and it's most likely to be effective for whatever purpose, drawing your manager's attention to whatever. That said, I think you hit on something really critical, that a manager can be taking everything towards the performance indicators and the goals and lose sight of the values. Sometimes values and mission statements are just things on a website or over the door. They're not really in the hearts of the people working there. And if a manager doesn't have the values but you do, then you have to actually draw their attention to that, I suspect. But I think it's fighting battles when they come up, not looking for battles to fight.
Is it something that as an employee, and I use that word just as someone who would be managing up, that you have to be aware that you're doing, and is it something you can learn? Is it a skill that you can learn?
Without a doubt.
A lot of intuition involved.
Yeah, without a doubt. And as I said in our last Managing Upwards that was posted on LinkedIn, you've got to know your manager, you've got to know what their pain points are, and then to hit them with that. So I think, yeah, it's definitely, there is a right time and a wrong time. But sorry, something else, my brain's going around. Something else that Steve said was around, if you were permanently managing upwards, that would be wrong. Well, I've come across situations with my clients where employees manage their bosses.
Yes,
it does happen. As a complete role reversal happens. Elizabeth.
We've all seen a school that the secretary runs. The secretary knows everything, and manages the principal. Well spoken.
Yeah. I know that you were in that position when you worked in corporate, Elizabeth, where you were running the show. So that's our 10 minutes. I'm going to have to cut us off there, but I really appreciate the conversation. I love that we came up with the idea that calling the boss's attention to something is a form of managing up, and knowing when, and that it's a skill you can learn. So I would encourage you to go out there, practice, learn to manage up, because it's a really important skill. So thanks so much for being here and having this conversation with me, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much.